Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here. I was just about to do a little drinking and a little thinking. So I'd love for you all to join me. And I know those two words don't usually go together, drinking and thinking, but on my show they do. So come, let's have a drink. Kick back, relax. Weekend's here, so why not? Once again, BYOB, or don't bring anything at all. Please don't feel obligated to drink if you don't want to. You know, some people Scotch people and they look down on the bourbon people or whatever. I mean, we don't do that here, right? The important thing is that you're having a good time and you're comfortable, right? That being said, cheers to you. And Jesus too. It's the malt from Missouri. Did I mention that already? Don't think I did. Not bad. Not the best I've ever had, but certainly not bad. And I bought it, so I might as well drink it. Anyway, as far as the thinking goes, I wanted to share something with you all. A lot of talk about socialism these days. You know, it seems like it's the hot new thing. Everybody's talking about it. And I don't quite understand a lot of the stuff that people are saying about it, because it doesn't seem like it's true. People are saying really positive things about socialism, and when you look at the history of socialism, there isn't much positive that happened. And myself, I'm kind of a student of history. I'm an IT guy by trade, but when I was a kid, my dad was buying military history, military heritage magazines. I was always at the library, you know, in the history section, pulling down books and reading them. So it's kind of my thing, and I feel like that's kind of given me the background and the perspective to kind of, well, call it out for what it is, and I'm just surprised. And when I talk to people, a lot of people don't know these things. You know, schools aren't educating people properly. I mean, you go to universities, colleges these days, they're actually praising socialism, which is just astounding. It's shocking. Public education isn't teaching kids properly. The media has completely abdicated its responsibilities, you know, honest journalism, to, once again, educate, teach people about what happened. And, you know, people are saying socialism is hot, it's the way forward, you know, it's for the little guy. Okay, all right. However, riddle me this, guys. If socialism was so great, why were so many people trying to escape? And it wasn't a small number, by the way. It wasn't a few. These thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. And they're here. They're still around, by the way. You can talk to them that were under socialism and talk about how terrible it was and the things that happened. It was brutal. Anyway, on that note, people escaping socialism, I just kind of wanted to share with you one of my favorite escape stories. It's kind of an unusual escape from, well, socialism. So, yeah, got my handy-dandy notes. Try not to take up too much of your time. And this escape actually happened in East Germany. After World War II, the Allies, you know, Great Britain, France, the United States, Russia, they kind of split up Germany. And this article will cover it, but that's just kind of the quick background. And that being said, let's get right to it. There's a lot of articles and stuff that kind of covered this, but my favorite one that I found was from CNET, oddly enough. And CNET normally does tech stuff, but this interview and the story is actually really good. So I'll link it below in the comments. Check it out. The article is called How Two Families Fled Communist Oppression in East Germany in a Homemade Hot Air Balloon. And this is by Shara Tibkin. Article's written in 2019, so fairly recent. And without further ado, the article reads as follows. All it took was courage, science, and 14,000 square feet of taffeta. It was a crisp Saturday in September 1979, and a breeze was blowing strong and steady from the north. That's what would help Gunther Wetzel and his colleague Peter Strelzik escape East Germany with their families in the middle of the night, thanks to a hot air balloon they'd built from scratch, using only a magazine article as a guide. The thought of leaving had been festering in my mind for years, but it was clear that it was very, very dangerous to go via a land route, said Wetzel, now 65 years old. When I saw pictures of these balloons, I knew it was a possibility. Wetzel talked to CNET through a German interpreter shortly after the 40th anniversary of his flight and ahead of the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9th. The flight was one of the most daring and ingenious escapes ever made from East Germany. There was no certainty of success, and failure would have meant imprisonment or even death. For Wetzel and many others, the desire for freedom outweighed the risks. If we hadn't been so optimistic, we probably couldn't have done it, he said. Wetzel and Strelzik have told different accounts of their escape, with each man claiming credit for the idea. They stopped talking shortly after arriving in the West, and never reconciled before Strelzik's death in March 2017. What follows is Wetzel's account of their flight to West Germany. A divided Germany. After World War II, Germany was divided between East and West. The West, with the help of the US and Britain, flourished and modernized. The East, under the influence of the Soviet Union, struggled. About 3.6 million East Germans, 20% of the population, fled between 1945 and 1961. Alright, side note. Isn't it odd? The West, capitalism, free markets, relatively free markets, flourished. And the East, under communism and big government, regulations, overbearing government, right? Government controlling things, dictating who can do what, didn't flourish. Odd. Very, very odd, but I make a mental note of that, please. And also, about 3.6 million East Germans, 20% of the population, fled between 1945 and 1961. Like I said earlier, if socialism is so great, why did millions, I think I said thousands earlier, millions of people fled socialism? That doesn't sound like it was working out for the people. Just a thought, just a side note. Anyway, continuing on. East Germany, known as the German Democratic Republic, GDR, or Deutsche Demokrat Republic. Yeah, sorry. My German is awful. I apologize. GDR. It didn't want the rest of its citizens to leave for the richer West. So, in August 1961, it built barriers to keep its people in. The official GDR line, it wanted to keep decadent, immoral Westerners out. Interesting. The Berlin Wall's 96-mile-long, 12-foot-tall concrete barrier is well known, but simple, barbed wire fences divided other parts of the country. Trying to climb over the barriers would set off machine guns, mines, and other horrors. Soldiers patrolled a no-man's land along the border. About 150,000 people attempted escape during the 28 years that the East German barrier existed. An estimated 40,000 succeeded. While some East Germans flew planes to safety, no one had ever attempted to escape by balloon. Another side note, Germany was divided between East and West. Berlin, the capital, was also divided between East and West. And they built this giant wall between East and West Berlin. And I didn't see that here in the article. Oh, the Berlin's Wall, 96 mile long. So just in case you missed it, there was East and West Germany, but there was also East and West Berlin. So just wanted to make sure, that you knew. Oh, side note. Another side note. So the wall went up, the Berlin Wall, right, because too many people were leaving and they didn't want them to leave. And from Wikipedia, which I'm also going to link below, I found some interesting quotes that I really just wanted to share with you. Soviet East German ambassador Michael Pervukin, Take two. Michael Pervukin. Yeah, that's as good as it's going to get. Observed that, quote, the presence in Berlin of an open and essentially uncontrolled border between the socialist and capitalist worlds unwittingly prompts the population to make a comparison between both parts of the city, which unfortunately does not always turn out in favor of democratic East Berlin. Really? You're telling me that given a choice, people will not choose to live under a giant, unbearing, unforgiving, large government that doesn't let you succeed, tells you what to do, doesn't give you freedom? Socialism in a nutshell? You're telling me that people will not choose to live under socialism if they're given a choice? That's, once again, interesting to note. Remember that. Remember that. Please do. And, okay, I'm just going to say it. Look at California, by the way. The worst state in the union, in my opinion, and unfortunately where I live. I love California. It's a beautiful state, ruined by ugly people. And people are fleeing here. I mean, there's articles all over. I mean, you can check them out. There's videos on YouTube. There's an exodus going on right now from California to other states. Why is that? Because we have an overbearing government. We have rules and regulations and restrictions for everything, everywhere. And everything costs money, right? There are fees, fines, taxes. I mean, even regulations cost money. People don't think about this. But if you make a rule that, regulation that has to be complied with, that costs money. Because now I have to do something that I wasn't going to otherwise have done. Or maybe I have to do something, you're compelling me to do something. It costs money, right? Nothing's free. So, once again, I just want you to make a note of that. Here in California, right, socialism is hot here, and people are leaving. People are leaving California. So, another note I wanted to bring up, quote from the Wikipedia article. The East German government claimed that the wall was an anti-fascist protective rampart. I'm not even going to try to say that German word. Schutzwall. Yeah. Intended to dissuade aggression from the West. So they're blaming fascist elements for the socialist failures. Where have we seen that before? Could there be some sort of anti-fascist group running around that is actually engaging in fascist tactics and claiming that they're anti-fascist? Maybe. Interesting. Could the left? I mean, everywhere you look, there's alt-right, there's fascist elements everywhere. So it just goes to show you that the left never changes deep down. It's the same thing. Blaming other people for their failures. Fascists, alt-right instigators. Their playbook doesn't change. So, once again, please remember this. Remember their shenanigans. Oh. Anyway. I have an affinity for paper. But sometimes it gets a little unmanageable. Anyway, moving on. Back to the article from CNET. Life in East Germany. Life in East Germany. Life in Westelsholm of Posnack, which today has a population of about 12,000 people, was typical for most of East Germany. The Czech Republic is about an hour's drive east, and it's bordered on the west by Bavaria, part of West Germany. The Socialist Unity Party of Germany, also known as the East German Communist Party, held tight control over people's lives, professions, and futures. Opposing political views were squashed, and the dictatorship prevented free elections and freedom of movement. The Ministry for State Security, commonly called the Stasi, forced neighbors to spy on each other and compiled extensive files on citizens. Food, supplies, and housing shortages were part of daily life. I'm going to repeat that. Under socialism, right? Food, supplies, and housing shortages were part of daily life. Remember that. Wetzel lived in a single-family home that he renovated in his spare time. He drove a truck delivering furniture and construction materials. In the eyes of the government, Wetzel had black marks against him. His father had fled to the West, and Wetzel had refused to join the Communist Party. Because of that, the GDR denied Wetzel's request to study physics after high school. Instead, he studied forestry, bricklaying, and truck driving. His love of physics is partly what drove Wetzel's desire to leave East Germany, and a big reason why he succeeded with the seemingly outlandish idea for a hot air balloon. The private part of life in the GDR my family and I enjoyed, Wetzel said. It more was the public life. We couldn't express our opinions. While Wetzel couldn't work in or study the sciences, he tinkered with machines in his spare time. He built electric and lighting systems for his home and repaired the building's plumbing. We didn't think it was a crazy plan at all. We were totally sure we'd finally found a secure plan to leave the GDR. In 1974, he met Peter Strelzik through family members visiting from the West, which was permitted at the time. The two men later worked together as self-employed electricians. In March 1978, Wetzel's sister-in-law, who had left East Germany in 1958, returned for a visit and brought a magazine with an article about the International Balloon Fiesta in Albuquerque, New Mexico. When he saw photos of hot air balloons floating in the air, he thought, "This can't be that difficult." He immediately told Strelzik about the idea, and they decided that a hot air balloon would be the way to leave East Germany with their wives and children. "We didn't think it was a crazy plan at all," Wetzel said. "We were totally sure we'd finally found a secure plan to leave the GDR. The science behind the balloon. Hot air balloons are relatively simple. Heat air inside a balloon using a burner and it will rise. Attach a basket to the bottom to hold the burner and passengers, and the balloon will float where the wind takes it. But making a hot air balloon that would carry 8 people to West Germany wasn't easy. For Wetzel and Strelzik, building a balloon was a matter of trial and error. I looked at the pictures and kind of estimated how big the balloon was and how big the people in the picture were," Wetzel said. He made mental calculations, ultimately settling on 1,800 cubic meters, or 63,566 cubic feet. The two men bought reams of material, largely fabric used to line leather, because it was available in large quantities. They initially stored the fabric in Wetzel's house, cutting and sewing in his bedroom on the second floor. As they progressed, the balloon became too heavy to carry upstairs, so they moved to the basement of Strelzik's home. The men needed a propane gas fire burner to power the balloon. They took a section of stovepipe, about 12 centimeters in diameter, connected it to a gas cylinder, and added a hose, valve, and nozzles. Next came a basket. They couldn't weave a fancy basket, but instead welded together a 1.4 square meter, 15 square foot, steel frame. On April 28, 1978, they were ready for a test flight. They traveled to a forest clearing near Ziegenruck and had their wives hold open the balloon. Wetzel and Strelzik used the burner to warm the air, but nothing happened. Wetzel and Strelzik had miscalculated, badly. The fabric they used was too porous, letting hot air escape. Airproofing chemicals would make the balloon too heavy. They had to give up. The balloon wouldn't even take off the ground, Wetzel said. They burned it to destroy all traces of their plot, but that only made them more determined to build one that could fly. Our sole focus became to create a balloon that would bring us over to the West, Wetzel said. Try again. With the second attempt, Wetzel and Strelzik were more methodical. Their experience had taught them about gases, as well as how big the balloon actually needed to be. Their first balloon wouldn't have been nearly big enough for 8 people, and then there was the fabric. They knew what they'd used before didn't work, but had no idea what would be best. So Wetzel created special tools, using a U-shaped glass tube to test air pressure and the porousness of the materials that helped them narrow down the choice of materials. The men ended up using 900 square meters of taffeta, fabric used in ball gowns, which they bought in a store in Leipzig at the beginning of June. They told the shopkeeper they were buying fabric to make sails for a boating club. They also had to adjust the size of the balloon. Wetzel referred to a couple of physics books he kept at home to determine engineering, thermodynamics, and the effects of temperature changes on the behavior of air. That helped him calculate what he thought was the right dimension for the balloon. 2,200 cubic meters, up from 1,800 before. They also fashioned a blower out of the engine from Wetzel's motorcycle, letting it fill the balloon with cool air before it was heated. That turned out to be the key. Within minutes of starting the blower and turning on the burner, the balloon was fully inflated, but the burners went through the gas too quickly, allowing the air to cool. The burner's performance continually worsened, so much so that the balloon barely stayed inflated. They started experimenting, adding cylinders and changing the composition of the chemicals, until ending up with a combination of gasoline and oxygen. One can imagine how this combination of fuel and oxygen would have behaved and what terrible things could occur, Wetzel noted on his website. Fortunately, nothing dramatic happened, and the flame reached a height equivalent to a 3-story house. It was during the building of the second balloon that a rift emerged between Wetzel and Strelzik. At the same time, it was quite clear that I had miscalculated the second balloon, and not all the people could leave in it, Wetzel said. Instead of continuing to work on the balloon with Strelzik, he instead started to build an airplane on his own to leave with his family, his wife Petra, and sons, Peter, 5, and Andreas, 2. But Strelzik didn't give up. In July 1979, he gathered his wife Doris and their sons Frank, 15, and Andreas, 11. They drove to a deserted clearing, set up the balloon, and took off around 1:30 a.m. They were headed towards West Germany until the balloon went through a cloud, weighing down the fabric and causing it to descend. They landed short of the west by about 180 meters, 590 feet, crashing on the GDR side of the landmine-covered border zone. When Wetzel heard about the balloon, he knew Strelzik had nearly succeeded. He also knew that once the Stasi found out about Strelzik, they'd quickly move on to Wetzel. The partnership was back on in late July 1979. The state was probably going to look for us, Wetzel said. Building a balloon was a quicker and safer option than building an airplane or waiting for the Stasi to find them. And again, this time they had to succeed, so they had to make the balloon a lot bigger. The men doubled the size of the balloon to 4,200 cubic meters, which would require about 1,300 square meters, or 13,993 square feet, of fabric. They used everything they could find: taffeta, umbrella fabric, tent nylon, and bed linen. Because officials were looking for people buying large amounts of fabric, the men and their wives drove all over East Germany to acquire the material. Wetzel, who had returned to a full-time job, called in sick from work to sew the balloon night and day, with the help of Strelzik's older son. After 5 weeks, the balloon was nearly done. The men felt like they were racing against time, worried they could be discovered at any moment. The forecast on September 15th looked perfect, so the families hurried their preparations, finishing the stitching of the balloon at 10 p.m. Wetzel and Strelzik drove to the highest hill near Posneck to see if the wind was strong enough for flight. It was. They rushed home to gather their families and the balloon, taking nothing with them beyond school and identification papers. The two families arrived at the launch site around 1 a.m. and waited to be sure they hadn't been followed. Half an hour later, they started to set up the balloon. Within 5 minutes, it was fully inflated. Everyone jumped into the basket. They didn't have time to be afraid. We were under so much pressure that we just functioned, Wetzel said. There was no room for any feelings whatsoever. The flight didn't start smoothly. Wetzel and Frank stood at opposite corners to cut the anchor ropes, but they didn't release them at the same time, causing the balloon to tilt into the flaming burner. The fabric caught fire as the last anchor shot up from the ground and grazed Frank's head. They quickly put out the flames using a fire extinguisher, but a hole in the top of the balloon meant they had to fire the burner the entire flight. At 2:32 a.m., the balloon soared into the sky, reaching an altitude of 2,000 meters and hitting the 50-kilometer-per-hour winds that pushed it along. There was no way to steer the balloon, and the families were at the mercy of the wind. No one spoke until they spotted 3 bright searchlights in the distance. It was a border crossing. It was the next moment that posed grave danger. The burner went out. Efforts to relight the flame only worked for brief spurts. They were out of gas, and the balloon fell rapidly before landing in among the trees. Had they made it to the west? They didn't know for sure, so they started walking south. Soon they spotted a sign for a power plant called Uberlandwerk, something they'd never seen in East Germany. Farm machinery in the building, and the eventual arrival of the West German police confirmed it. They had landed in Naila, West Germany. The flight took 28 minutes. They had made it to the west. They were free. The town of Naila gave the families apartments and aid to get started. Disney bought the rights to their story and released a film, Night Crossing, in 1982. Last year, so it would have been 2018, a German filmmaker released a thriller about the escape called Balloon. 10 years later, after arriving in West Germany, Wetzel watched the Berlin walls collapse on TV. I had felt that something was going to happen, but I didn't think it would go that quickly, he said. The moment was indescribable. Fiona Weber Steinhaus translated Wetzel's thoughts from German into English. And the article is written as a part of the Goethe Institute's Close-Up Journalists Exchange Program. I'll link that below. But yeah. And that's about it. Oddly enough, I saw the movie Night Crossing, the one that Disney made. I haven't seen Balloon yet. It's on my list, but as a kid, I saw Night Crossing on home video, back when VHS was a thing, back in my day. And it stuck with me. It really did stick with me. As a kid, it wasn't an action movie. It wasn't a cartoon. It was just people trying to escape, and the tension in the movie, you can kind of feel it. They're desperate. The government is horrible, socialism is terrible, and they're doing everything they can to escape, to get out. And like I said, it really stuck with me. It left an impression on, young me, and I've never forgotten it. And I hope the same goes for you. And that's why I want to share this story. And I hope you watch the movie. Even to this day, it still holds up. The camera work and everything, it's old, but the story, the tension, it really, really holds up. And I would encourage you to watch it. And Balloon, I'm sure it's pretty good. I'll be watching it soon. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you all. Really, socialism is not the way. Freedom, free markets, limited government, it brings prosperity and wealth to everybody. Socialism enriches the few. The people at the top get the benefits, they get the perks. The people at the bottom eat it, right? They stick it to you. Income inequality, political inequality, all that is a result of big government and socialism in particular. So the next time somebody tries to tell you that socialism is a program for the little guy, it is a liberator of the oppressed, and all these wonderful good things, you should politely but firmly remind them how wrong they are. And with that being said, I'll leave it there tonight. I hope you all got something out of that. I hope you share, by the way. I hope you spread this to other people. Let everybody know, your friends, your family. I hope you share my video, but just the story itself, please do share. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And also check out the description below, for ways to support my channel. I hope you tune in again. I just hope you have a good weekend, a good week. I wish the best for you. just good things, good things. Yeah, I hope you join me again. This is good, I enjoy doing this. I enjoy having you all. Yeah. Anyway, enough sappiness for now. Yeah. Take care, everyone. Good night.